with respect to sulphate content. That is sulphate ions, how many sulphate ions are present in the wastewater sample, that we are going to estimate. The chemicals required for this experiment is wastewater sample, from which we have to determine the sulphate content, then concentrated HCl and 5% barium chloride reagent. The principle of this method is the sulphate ions present into the wastewater samples, we are going to react that sulphate ions with barium chloride reagents, so that there is a formation of white precipitate of barium sulphate. That white precipitate of barium sulphate, we are going to filter it through Gooch crucible, and we can determine the sulphate content by using gravimetric method. The reaction for this is barium chloride, that is BaCl2 is reacting with SO4 2-, that is sulphate ions. There is a formation of white precipitate of BaSO4. There are three pictures here which shows how the barium sulphate precipitate is formed. And in last picture, white precipitate of barium sulphate is formed as soon as we are adding barium chloride reagent into the wastewater sample. So depending upon the concentration of the sulphate ions, we will get the barium sulphate precipitate. In actual procedure, the wastewater sample, given wastewater sample, we have to dilute it to 100 ml in a volumetric flask, and from that diluted sample solution we have to take 25 ml diluted sample solution in a beaker. In that solution we have to add 3 to 5 ml concentrated HCl, then we will add 15 to 20 ml barium chloride reagent. After addition of barium chloride reagent, we will get white precipitate if sulphate ions are present into the wastewater sample, and that white precipitate we have to digest it now. Digestion of the precipitate is just heating the precipitate with mother liquor. After heating the precipitate, we have to precipitate with mother liquor, that solution we have to filter it through Gooch crucible. But here the Gooch crucible should be previously weighed. Okay, we have to take the empty Gooch crucible weight, and then that crucible we will use it for filtration purpose. And after filtration, the precipitate with Gooch crucible, that we are going to place it in oven for drying, and then we are going to weigh. After drying, we are going to weigh the Gooch crucible with precipitate, and finally from that weight we can calculate the amount of sulphate ions in the given wastewater sample. Observation table for this experiment is given here. Here W1, it is empty Gooch crucible weight, W2 is the Gooch crucible weight with residue, and W2 minus W1 is the weight of the residue. Residue is your barium sulphate precipitate. Now here we got the barium sulphate precipitate, and W2 minus W1 is nothing but the weight of barium sulphate precipitate. But we don't want barium sulphate, we want sulphate ions. So in calculation we will use the relation 1 mole of barium sulphate contains 1 mole of sulphate ions. So 233.3 grams of barium sulphate contains 96 grams of sulphate ions. So therefore W2 minus W1 gram of barium sulphate contains how many grams of sulphate ions, that we will find out first by cross multiplication. We will get the answer a gram of sulphate ion, but initially we have taken 25 ml of diluted sample solution. So for that 25 ml diluted sample solution we got a gram of sulphate ions. We have to calculate the sulphate ions for 100 ml diluted sample solution. So we will do here cross multiplication, and we can calculate the amount of sulphate ions present into 100 ml diluted sample solution, and finally we can formulate a result as amount of sulphate ions in the given wastewater sample in grams. Thank you. the sulfate estimation of sulfate from wastewater sample experiment. I'm going to show you how to estimate sulfate ions, how to estimate the amount of sulfate ions from the wastewater sample. And for this purpose we require the solutions such as distilled water, then sample solution or wastewater sample solution, and then 5% barium chloride reagent, and one more solution is required, that is 2 normal HCl solution. Okay, now here in this beaker I had taken a sample solution. Now whenever you are doing the actual experiment, then I am going to give you a certain wastewater sample solution, and that you will have to dilute it to 100 ml. Now in this beaker I had taken the diluted sample solution. Already I had diluted it to 100 ml, and that I had taken in this beaker. Now from this beaker, from this 100 ml diluted solution, we are going to take 25 ml in the beaker. Now this is the another beaker in which I had taken the 25 ml of the diluted sample solution. Now here I am going to add 10 ml HCl, 10 ml 2 normal HCl. Now as we had seen in the theory that in presence of HCl, the barium chloride, it is reacting with the sulfate ion present into a wastewater sample, and there is a formation of barium sulfate precipitate. Okay, now I am going to show you how the barium sulfate precipitate is formed. Okay, now this is the 25 ml wastewater sample, diluted wastewater sample. Now in this I am going to add about 10 ml 2 normal HCl, and I am going to stir it well while addition. Now we should have to add here a barium chloride solution. Now this beaker, it contains 5% barium chloride solution, and now I am going to add this 5% barium chloride solution in dropwise manner in our diluted sample solution. Okay, so that we will get a white precipitate of barium sulfate. Okay, now see how you are getting the precipitate. I had added 10 ml of barium chloride solution to this our wastewater sample which we had taken in this beaker, and you can see the white precipitate which is formed, and this white precipitate, this is of barium sulfate. Okay, now we are going to heat this precipitate with the mother liquor, and that process we are calling it as the digestion of precipitate. Now after digestion we are going to filter this precipitate through Gooch crucible. Okay? We are going to filter this precipitate through Gooch crucible, and we are going to wash it with distilled water. Okay, hot distilled water. This is your precipitate which I have digested by heating. Now I had taken a Gooch crucible which is previously dried and weighed, and this precipitate I am going to filter it through Gooch crucible. Okay, this way.
washings of hot distilled water in this way. We will give washings of the hot distilled water to the precipitate. This is first hot distilled water. I am going to give you the washings to the precipitate. I will remove this from this flask, and in this way you will get a precipitate in a gooch crucible. Now this gooch crucible we should have to dry it in oven with precipitate, okay, and we have to weigh it again with precipitate, okay, and we should have to calculate the difference between the empty crucible and the gooch crucible with residue. In this way you can see the precipitate. This is the white precipitate.